welcome back to our read alouds for this week. So this week we're focusing on books that can teach us about kindness and helping others. Now this read aloud today is no different. We're going to be reading a book called The Curious Garden. And one of my favorite things to do is to walk around my neighborhood and observe all the different beautiful flowers and plants and trees that are growing in my neighborhood. And one of the cool things is that we also have a curious garden by my house, but it's actually called the Hidden Garden. And my neighbor takes care of it and makes sure that all of this stretch of beautiful land by the metro tracks is taken care of by planting flowers to bring beauty to our neighborhood. And so today we're going to be reading a read aloud that is about a boy who tries to start a garden in the most curious place. And what we're going to do as your response today is you are going to have to tell me by sequencing the main events in the story, starting with the beginning, the middle, and the end, because it's really important as a reader that we can comprehend the important events that happen within our story. And then tomorrow you have a really fun activity. You are going to go around your own neighborhood and take pictures and capture some curious places in which you see plants or trees or flowers growing in your own neighborhood, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started with our read aloud.
The Curious Garden. There once was a city without gardens or trees or greenery of any kind. Most people spent their time indoors. As you can imagine, it was a very dreary place. However, there was one boy who loved being outside. Even on drizzly days, while everyone else stayed inside, you could always find Liam happily splashing through his neighborhood. It was on one such morning that Liam made several surprising discoveries. He was wandering around the old railway, as he did from time to time, when he stumbled upon a dark stairwell leading up to the tracks. The railway had stopped working ages ago. And since Liam had always wanted to explore the tracks, there was only one thing for the curious boy to do. Liam ran up the stairs, pushed open the door, and stepped out onto the railway. The first thing he saw was a lonely patch of colour.
All right, and so we're going to pause really quick first grade and think about what has happened so far in our story. So what has happened in the beginning of our text? So I want you to think about that. Where are they? What does the setting look like? What is Liam up to? Where is he going? Because these are going to be details that I'd like for you to add to your sequencing of beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so let's keep reading on and see what happens.
Wildflowers and plants were the last things he had expected to find up there. But when he took a closer look, it became clear that the plants were dying. They needed a gardener. Liam may not have been a gardener, but he knew that he could help. So he returned to the railway the very next day and got to work. The flowers nearly drowned, he had a few pruning problems. But the plants patiently waited while Liam found better ways of gardening. As the weeks rolled by, Liam began to feel like a real gardener, and the plants began to feel like a real garden. Most gardens stay in one place, but this was no ordinary garden. With miles of open railway ahead of it, the garden was growing restless. It wanted to explore. The tough little weeds and mosses were the first to move. They popped up farther and farther down the tracks and were closely followed by the more delicate plants. Over the next few months, Liam and the curious garden explored every corner of the railway. After spending his spring and summer and autumn with the garden, Liam's time on the railway was finally interrupted by winter. Heavy blankets of snow fell on the city that season. And for the first time since he'd become a gardener, Liam could not visit the plants. Rather than waste his winter worrying about the garden, Liam spent it preparing for spring. After 3
So again, we're going to pause and do a quick check-in, first grade, of what has happened so far now in the middle of our story. So once Liam discovered a tiny little patch of a garden growing on the railroad, what did he do and what started to happen within that little patch? I love how it started to be curious, just like Liam, and start to grow and spread along the railway. I was reminded when we learned about how seeds disperse, and I was thinking that maybe some of those seeds were being carried in the wind and were landing other places and starting to grow. So let's continue to see what happens next.
cold months, the snow finally began to melt, and Liam rolled his new gardening gear over to the railway. Winter had taken a toll on the garden. But thanks to Liam's planning, his handy new tools, and a little help from the sun, the plants soon awoke from their winter sleep. The garden had always wanted to explore the rest of the city, and that spring it was finally ready to make its move. Once again, the tough little weeds and mosses set out first. They popped up farther and farther from the railway and were closely followed by the more delicate plants. The garden was especially curious about old, forgotten things. A few plants popped up where they didn't belong. Others mysteriously popped up all at once. But the most surprising things that popped up were the new gardeners. Many years later, the entire city had blossomed. But of all the new gardens, Liam's favourite was where it all began.
And so, first grade, in our book that we read, The Curious Garden, we learned that Liam was a curious character and wanted to know what was on top of the abandoned railway tracks. And then he started a garden which over time inspired others to also start gardening and to beautify their city. And so in your Seesaw account today, you are going to go and you're going to write and label with some pictures what happened in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. And then there's a can do at the bottom. And then tomorrow, remember, I'm really excited. There's a link in your Seesaw account for the directions to this. You're going to go around your neighborhood with a camera or your cell phone, and you're going to take pictures of curious places that you see gardens growing. So I'm very excited to see that tomorrow. So continue to be kind to one another, being kind to nature as well, and have a lovely day, first grade. Bye.